The little girl was left hanging from a tree in the middle of a forest. She was unconscious, tied up with a cloth, as if she were a discarded burden. Her mother ran, crying without looking back. But she wasn't alone. A mysterious millionaire, who was passing by in search of solitude, saw everything, and what he did changed their destinies forever. A story of abandonment that turned into the most unlikely family you've ever seen. Get ready for an exciting journey of pain, redemption, and unconditional love. Subscribe to the channel to receive heartwarming stories every day. The echo of footsteps resounded through the mansion's empty hallway, a ghostly sound that seemed to pursue the tall man with the slumped shoulders. At 42, the millionaire carried the weight of a fortune that no longer meant anything and a heart that had stopped beating 3 years earlier when the accident took his wife and 5-year-old daughter. The curtains had remained closed for months. Natural light was a distant memory, as was the sound of childish laughter that once filled every room in the residence. Now, only silence reigned, occasionally interrupted by the dry tap of his Italian leather shoes against the cold marble. He stopped in front of the entrance hall mirror, observing the reflection of a stranger. His grey hair at 42 testified to the suffering that no amount of money could cure. His eyes, once bright during business meetings, now looked like empty wells. His company continued to grow under the management of his younger sister, but he had become a ghost in his own life. The morning arrived like all the others, silent and without purpose. He put on his dark tracksuit and hiking boots, rituals that had become his only connection to the outside world. The forest surrounding his property offered something that no therapist could, the promise of absolute emptiness. The trail meandered between 100-year-old oak trees, and the morning air carried the humid scent of the earth. His feet followed the memorized path, while his mind remained numbed by the routine. That's how he preferred it, without surprises, without emotions, without the possibility of feeling the stinging pain of loss again. The strange noise made him stop. It was different from the usual sounds of the forest. It wasn't the wind in the leaves or the singing of the birds. It was something human, something desperate. His muscles tensed for the first time in months. The instinct that had fallen asleep inside him began to awaken like an animal sniffing out danger. He followed the sound, his steps becoming faster with each meter. What he saw made him stop completely. A woman was running through the trees, her disheveled hair partially covering her tear-stained face. Her simple clothes were dirty with earth, and she was carrying a small backpack on her back. But it wasn't the woman that caught his attention. Hanging from a strong oak branch, swaying gently in the morning breeze, was a small figure wrapped in a white sheet. The fabric was tied like a bundle, but the human form was unmistakable. It was a child. The millionaire felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The pure adrenaline of shock. His heart, which had learned to beat just enough to keep him alive, began to race. His legs moved before his mind fully processed the scene. The woman had disappeared into the trees, her sobs echoing further and further away. But the child remained there, too still for his comfort. He ran towards the tree, his body remembering an agility he thought he had lost forever. The lower branches were within his reach, and he began to climb with a determination that surprised him. The sheet was securely tied, but his hands worked with precision to untie the knots. When he finally managed to release the small figure, the weight in his arms hit him like a lightning bolt. It was a girl of approximately 7 years old, unconscious, with skin as pale as porcelain and lips tinged with a worrying blue. Her breathing was weak and irregular. Each movement of her chest seemed like a monumental effort. For the first time in 3 years, the millionaire felt fear. Not the abstract fear of loneliness or emotional pain, but the concrete and immediate fear of losing something precious. And that terrified him more than anything. The walk back to the mansion had never seemed so long. With each step, the millionaire felt the weight of responsibility grow in his arms. The girl remained unconscious, her head resting against his chest, and he could feel the fragility of her breathing through his shirt. His hands trembled, a sensation he had forgotten completely. During the last 3 years, his existence had been marked by a haunted calm, an artificial peace built on emotional emptiness. Now carrying that unknown child, he felt alive in a way that frightened him. The mansion emerged from the trees like a somber castle. The closed windows in the abandoned gardens reflected the state of mind of its owner, but today it shamed him. What kind of place was that to receive a child? He took her directly to the guest room on the ground floor, a room he hadn't visited in months. The bed was covered with an immaculate white sheet. His cleaning staff kept the house spotless even in his emotional absence. He placed the girl carefully on the mattress, noticing how even smaller she looked against the vastness of the furniture. With trembling hands, he dialed the number of his private doctor. Dr. Williams had been responsible for his family for years, including the darkest moments after the accident. If anyone could help without asking inconvenient questions, it would be him. "I need you to come to my house immediately," he said on the phone, his voice sounding strange after weeks of almost absolute silence. "It's a pediatric emergency." While waiting, he remained beside the bed, watching the girl. Her brown hair was tangled and small scratches marked her thin arms. Her clothes were simple but clean, suggesting maternal care even in the midst of despair. That's when she opened her eyes. They were brown, large and frightened, like those of a wounded animal. For a moment, she just stared at him, processing where she was and who this unknown man was. Then, in a weak but clear voice, she whispered, "Mommy?" The millionaire felt something break inside his chest. "Your mom. She had to leave," he said, searching for words that wouldn't hurt anymore. "But you're safe now." "She said she didn't have a choice," the girl mumbled, closing her eyes again. "She said she loved me, but she didn't have a choice." Each word was like a blade cutting through the armor he had built around his heart. This child had been abandoned in the cruelest way possible, and yet she spoke of her mother without anger, only with a deep sadness that mirrored his own. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "I can't say," she replied, opening her eyes again. "Mommy said not to tell strangers my name." He nodded, respecting the caution that the mother had instilled in her daughter, even in the midst of despair. "Then you don't need to tell me. You can just call me friend." The girl coughed, a harsh sound that made him furrow his brow in concern. Her lips were even bluer, and she brought her small hand to her chest, as if something hurt inside. "My chest hurts," she said, her voice growing weaker. "It always hurts, but it's worse today." Dr. Williams arrived in 20 minutes, carrying his medical bag and an expression of contained curiosity. He was a man of 60, with grey hair and gentle eyes, who had seen the millionaire at his worst moments and had never judged him. "Where did you find her?" he asked as he examined the girl who had fallen back asleep. "In the forest. Someone abandoned her there." The doctor asked no further questions, concentrating on the exam. He used the stethoscope for long minutes, frowning. As he listened, he checked her pulse, temperature, and skin color. When he finished, his face was serious. "She needs to be hospitalized immediately," he said in a low voice. "There's something wrong with her heart. I can hear a very irregular murmur, and this cyanosis on her lips indicates serious circulatory problems." The millionaire felt the world spin. "Is it serious?" "It could be. I need more detailed tests to be sure," but Dr. Williams hesitated. "If it's what I suspect, she's going to need heart surgery, and it's not cheap." For the first time in years, the millionaire smiled, a sad but real smile. "Money is not a problem. Do everything that is necessary." The private hospital was a universe of white corridors and antiseptic smells that brought back painful memories. The millionaire remained in the waiting room while the girl underwent a battery of tests, his hands intertwined in a tension he hadn't felt in years. Dr. Williams emerged from the office with a grave expression. The tests have confirmed it. She has a complex congenital heart defect. Her heart doesn't pump blood properly to the lungs, hence the bluish color. It's a condition that can be fatal if left untreated. Then we will treat it, the millionaire replied immediately. The surgery is risky and expensive. We're talking about at least $200,000, not including post-operative care. And she's an abandoned child. Are you sure you want to take on this responsibility? The question echoed in the silence of the waiting room. The millionaire looked through the window at the hospital garden, where other children were playing under the care of their families. 3 years ago, his own daughter had run through similar gardens, her laughter echoing through the air like music. Why would I do this? He murmured to himself more than to the doctor. Why would I care about a stranger? But even as he uttered the words, he knew they were a lie. From the moment he picked her up in his arms, something had changed within him. It was as if a dead part of his soul had begun to pulse again. She reminds me of someone, he said finally. Dr. Williams nodded with understanding. Your daughter. Not just that. The millionaire stood up, walking to the window. She reminds me of what it's like to feel that the world is still worth it. During the next few hours, while the girl rested under light sedation, he found himself struggling against contradictory impulses. Part of him wanted to run away, go back to his silent mansion, and pretend that nothing had happened. The pain of caring again was almost unbearable. But another part, a part that he thought had died in the accident, whispered that this could be his second chance, not to replace what he had lost, but to honor his family's memory by saving a life. His phone rang. It was his sister. Where are you? Her voice carried the familiar irritation. We have a meeting with the Japanese investors in an hour. Cancel it. How do you mean, cancel it? You know how long it took to schedule this meeting. He looked through the glass of the pediatric ICU, where the girl was sleeping, connected to monitors that beeped regularly. I'm at the hospital. The silence on the other end of the line was followed by an explosion of concern. What happened? Are you okay? It's not me. It's a child I found. What child? What are you talking about? He told the story in a summarized form, omitting the most dramatic details. When he finished, his sister's silence was even longer. You've completely lost your mind, she said finally. You can't just adopt an abandoned child. There are laws, processes, investigations. And frankly, considering your mental state in recent years, my mental state is fine. You haven't left the house in months. You barely talk to people, and now you want to take responsibility for a sick child. Her words were like stabs, mainly because they contained truths that he preferred to ignore. But when he looked at the girl again, he felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since the accident, I feel useful, he said calmly. For the first time, I have a purpose beyond just existing. This is madness. You're projecting your feelings about our niece onto this stranger. No, his voice became firm. This is different. This is about doing what's right. When he hung up the phone, he knew he had crossed a line. There was no going back. The girl had become his responsibility, whether he wanted it or not. Dr. Williams approached with a clipboard. We need a legal guardian to authorize the surgery. Since she was abandoned, I'll sign as temporary guardian. Take care of the legal part later. The doctor hesitated. Are you sure? Once you sign these papers, you will be legally committed to her care. The millionaire picked up the pen without hesitation. Doctor, 3 years ago, I lost everything I loved. If there's a chance to save this girl, I'm going to grab it with both hands. His signature on the paper sealed more than a medical commitment. It sealed the beginning of a journey that would transform both of their lives forever. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. The millionaire spent the night at the hospital, sleeping uncomfortably in an armchair beside the girl's bed. It was the first time in years that he had slept in a place other than his king-size bed with 2,000 thread-count sheets. But strangely, he felt more at home than he had in a long time. During the night, the girl woke up. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the dimness of the room until they found the figure hunched in the armchair. "You're still here?" she whispered, surprised. "I promised you'd be safe," he replied, straightening up in his chair. "I don't usually break promises. My mom used to promise things too." Her voice carried a sad wisdom, disproportionate for her 7 years. "She said we'd be okay, that the money would come, that my heart would get better on its own. Sometimes adults make promises they can't keep," he said carefully, "not because they don't want to, but because circumstances are bigger than them." The girl was silent for a long moment. "She cried when she thought I was asleep. I heard her on the phone talking to people about money, about how she couldn't pay for my medicine. Every word was a window into the despair that had led to the abandonment." The millionaire began to understand that the mother was not a monster, but a woman broken by circumstances. "She loved you," he said softly. "Even if she did something terrible, she loved you." "How do you know?" "Because mothers who don't love don't care enough to cry." The nurse came in to check her vital signs, interrupting the conversation. After she left, the girl asked a question that caught him off guard. "Do you have children?" The question hit like a punch in the gut. "I did," he said finally. "A girl your age. What happened to her?" She's gone. To a place where I can't visit her." The girl nodded with an understanding that seemed to go beyond her words. "Is that why you helped me? Because she's not here anymore?" The brutal honesty of the question left him speechless. Was that the reason? Was he trying to save a stranger, to compensate for not having been able to save his own daughter? "Maybe," he admitted, "but does it matter? The important thing is that you're going to be okay, and then, when I get better, are you going to leave me too?" The question echoed in the silence of the room. He didn't have an answer because he genuinely didn't know. What would happen when she recovered? Would he hand her over to the adoption system, try to find relatives, or... "I don't know," he said, honestly. "But I won't abandon you. Not like your mom did." The next morning, as the girl was being prepared for surgery, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in 3 years. Praying. He wasn't a religious man, but at that moment, he needed to believe that some greater force was looking after that child. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Dr. Williams emerged from the operating room with blood-stained clothes and a tired smile. "It was a success," he announced. "Her heart is pumping normally for the first time in years. She'll need constant follow-up, but she can have a normal life." The relief he felt was so intense that his legs almost gave way. He leaned against the wall, breathing deeply for the first time in hours. "Can I see her? She's still in recovery, but in a few hours, yes." When he was finally able to enter the post-operative ICU, the girl was connected to various tubes and monitors, but her color was different. Her lips were no longer bluish, and her breathing seemed easier. She opened her eyes when she felt his presence. "It hurts less," she whispered, with a voice hoarse from the intubation. "It'll hurt even less with time," he promised, taking her small hand in his. "Are you going to stay with me?" The simple question carried the weight of a lifetime. He looked at that child who had entered his life in the most dramatic way possible and knew that his answer would change everything. "Yes," he said, "I'll stay." But as he made that promise, he didn't imagine that in a few days he would discover A secret that would make this decision much more complicated than he could ever have imagined. The girl's recovery was faster than Dr. Williams had predicted. Within a week, she was already walking through the hospital corridors, exploring every corner with the natural curiosity of a child who could finally breathe without pain. The millionaire had transformed one of the guest rooms of his mansion into a small private hospital. He hired specialized nurses, installed monitoring equipment, and even decorated the environment with cartoons on the walls, something he hadn't done since he prepared his daughter's room years ago. "Why are you doing all this?" the girl asked one afternoon while playing with a puzzle he had bought. It was the first time in years that her house had toys. "Because you deserve it," he replied simply. "My mom said I didn't deserve good things, that I was too expensive, that my broken heart cost too much money." The words hit like a slap. Your mom was wrong, very wrong. "But she was right about one thing," the girl continued, concentrating on the puzzle pieces. "I am expensive. You've spent a lot of money on me." "Money is just paper. You're priceless." She looked up, studying his face. "Didn't your daughter have a price either?" The question caught him off guard, as always happened when she mentioned his lost family. "No, she was everything." "Is that why your house is so sad? Because everything's gone?" He looked around, seeing his mansion through her eyes. It really was a somber place, full of expensive furniture but empty of life. "Yes, I stopped living when they left. But now I'm here," she said with the simple logic of a child. "So you can start living again, can't you?" The observation was so direct and honest that it left him speechless. In recent days, he had felt changes in himself. He woke up earlier, not to go for his solitary walks, but to check how she had slept. He smiled when she laughed. He worried when she coughed. "Maybe," he admitted. That night, when she was already asleep, he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He opened the curtains of his house. The moonlight entered through the large windows, illuminating the rooms that had remained in perpetual shadow. The next morning, he hired gardeners to revitalize the abandoned gardens. If a child was going to live there, she deserved a place full of life, not a mausoleum of memories. "The garden is beautiful," she commented, watching the workers through the window. "Are there going to be flowers?" "What kind of flowers do you like?" "I don't know many flowers," she admitted. "We lived in a small apartment without a garden, but Mom had a vase on the window with a yellow flower. She said it was called a sunflower. Then we'll plant sunflowers." His enthusiasm at hearing this was contagious. It was as if he was learning to rediscover the world through her eyes. But it was during a routine checkup with Dr. Williams that everything changed. "I need her documents to complete the medical record," the doctor said. "Birth certificate, vaccination card, things like that." The millionaire hesitated. "She was abandoned. I don't have those documents." "I understand, but legally you'll need them to formalize guardianship. And there's something else." Dr. Williams pulled out a file. "We did comprehensive blood tests before the surgery for possible transfusions, compatibility, things like that. And there's some information in the results that is interesting, mainly about her paternity." The millionaire's heart raced. Paternity? The tests revealed specific genetic markers. "If you want to be sure, we can do a DNA test." "Why would I do that?" Dr. Williams looked him directly in the eyes. "Because there's a chance she's your biological daughter." The world stopped. The air seemed thinner, and he had to lean on the table to keep from falling. "That's impossible. Did you have any relationships about 8 years ago? Someone who could have gotten pregnant?" His mind raced through his memories. 8 years ago, he was still married, but he had gone through a difficult period in the marriage. There were a few weeks when he and his wife almost separated, there was a woman, an employee of an event company that his company had hired. She was a simple, shy woman who worked cleaning up after corporate events. They had spoken. A few times during extended evenings at the office, she seemed lost, vulnerable, and he was emotionally devastated by the marital crisis. It only happened once, one night when they were both in the office late, when defenses were down and loneliness weighed too heavily. They never spoke again after that. He had reconciled with his wife, and the woman had simply disappeared. Changed companies, never saw her again. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Do you remember anyone?" He nodded slowly. "But why didn't she ever tell me? Why didn't she ever ask for help?" "Maybe she was afraid. You were married, rich, powerful. She was a cleaning lady. Imagine the difference. In worlds." When he got home that afternoon, he looked at the girl with completely new eyes. Her brown hair was like his, her eyes too. The shape of her face, now that he paid attention, had undeniable similarities. How had he not noticed before? "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing his disturbed expression. "You look sad." "I'm not sad," he said, kneeling down to her height. "I'm confused." "About what?" He looked into her eyes, and felt the world spin again. "About adult things, nothing you need to worry about." But as he put her to sleep that night, he knew that everything had changed. If she was really his daughter, that would explain the instant connection he had felt. It would explain why her mother had run in desperation through the forest. It would explain why he felt so protective of her, and it would explain why his decision to care for her had become infinitely more complicated. The DNA test result arrived on a Thursday morning. Dr. Williams called at 7 in the morning with a careful voice that already revealed the answer before he even spoke. 99% match, he said simply. "She's your daughter." The millionaire was having coffee in the kitchen when he received the call. The cup slipped from his hands, shattering on the marble floor with a sound that echoed throughout the entire mansion. His daughter. The girl he had found hanging from a tree like a discarded burden was his own daughter. For 8 years he had 2 daughters. One he knew and loved, who died in his arms. Another he never knew existed, who grew up in poverty while he accumulated millions. The weight of the revelation made him sit on the kitchen floor amidst the shards of the broken cup. How was it possible he hadn't noticed? How could a mother hide a truth like that for so long? "Daddy?" The girl's voice came from the stairs. She had started calling him that naturally, and now the word carried a completely different weight. "Why is there noise?" He looked up and saw her standing at the entrance to the kitchen, wearing the pink pajamas he had bought for her, her hair tousled from sleep. Her hair, her eyes, his daughter. "I broke a cup," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She approached carefully, avoiding the shards. "Are you crying?" Only then did he realize that tears were running down his face. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She sat on the floor next to him, ignoring the shards around. "Mommy used to cry like that sometimes too, when she thought I wasn't watching." The mention of the mother, her mother, made something break inside him. "Do you miss her?" "All the time. Even knowing that she left me, I miss her." "She didn't want to leave you," he said, the words coming out in a whisper. "She was desperate. Without money to treat you, without hope. How do you know?" The simple question carried the weight of a truth he still didn't know how to reveal. How to explain to a 7-year-old child that the man she had started calling Daddy was literally her father. How to tell her that her mother had hidden this secret for 8 years, carrying the burden of raising a sick daughter alone. "Because sometimes we know things about the people we love," he said carefully. She studied him with those big, intelligent eyes. "Do you love my mom?" The question hit him like a lightning bolt. Love? He barely knew the woman. His memory of her was fragmented. A shy employee with sad eyes who worked late cleaning offices. One night of mutual fragility that had resulted in a life. "I care about her," he said finally, "and I care a lot about you. So why don't we go look for her? Now that I have money for medicine, maybe she can come back." His heart clenched. The innocence of the suggestion was heartbreaking. How to explain that the world didn't work that simply, that child abandonment was a crime, that the media had already discovered the story and was turning the mother into a monster. It's complicated, he said, carefully clearing the shards so he wouldn't cut himself. Why is everything always complicated in the adult world? He stopped cleaning and looked at her. There was a melancholic wisdom in that question that made him realize how much she had grown up too fast, forced by circumstances to understand things that no child should understand. Because sometimes we make choices that seemed right at the time, but then we find out that they hurt people, he said, and then we don't know how to fix it. That afternoon, after she had fallen asleep for her post-operative nap, he called his lawyer. It was time to face the legal reality of that whole situation. You need to understand the gravity of this, said Dr. Anderson, a serious man of 60 who had handled the family's legal affairs for decades. If she really is your daughter, this changes everything. The mother could be charged with abandonment, but you could also be questioned about why you never acknowledged paternity. Because I didn't know. That will have to be proven. And considering that you're a public figure, this is going to become a national scandal. The media will devour you alive. Dr. Anderson was right. In recent weeks, some local newspapers had already published articles about the reclusive millionaire who saved an abandoned child. Indeed, the story was gaining traction on social media, with people divided between praising him as a hero and questioning his motives. And if they find out she's your biological daughter, they'll want to know everything. About the relationship with the mother, about why she never sought child support, about why you were sleeping with employees while you were married. Each word was like a stab. It was a difficult time in my marriage. My wife and I were almost separated. That won't matter to the media. They'll paint you as the rich guy who took advantage of a vulnerable employee and then abandoned her pregnant. But I didn't know. Do you think that matters? The narrative is already built. Irresponsible rich man versus poor, desperate woman. And in the middle of it all, a child who almost died because the biological father never took responsibility. The millionaire sat heavily in the armchair in his office. Outside, he could see the gardeners planting the sunflowers he had promised the girl. How had something that started as an act of compassion become so complicated? What's my option? Legally, you can officially acknowledge paternity and request custody. The mother will probably be prosecuted for abandonment, but considering the circumstances, the child's illness, her financial situation, it's possible she'll receive a lighter sentence. And she, the girl, she stays with you, but she'll grow up knowing that her mother is being prosecuted for abandoning her, and that her father only discovered her existence when she almost died. Dr. Anderson closed the file he had brought. There's another option. You cannot reveal paternity publicly. Keep the DNA results secret. Officially adopt her as an act of charity, and let the world continue to believe you're just a good Samaritan. That would be a lie. It would be protection. For her, for you, and yes, for the mother too. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stayed in the dark living room, looking through the window at the bedroom where his daughter, he could finally think of her that way, was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years, with a heart that was working perfectly. At 3 a.m, she appeared in the living room, dragging a teddy bear she had won at the hospital. "Can't sleep?" she asked, climbing onto the sofa next to him. "Sometimes adults stay awake thinking," he said, hugging her, "about sad things, about complicated things." She was silent for a moment, nestled against his chest. "Are you going to leave me if things get too complicated?" The question hit him like a punch. "Never. No matter how complicated it gets, I'll never leave you. Promise, promise?" But as he made that promise, he didn't imagine that in a few hours he would receive a call that would test his determination in a way he could never have imagined. The call came at 6 in the morning on a Friday. It was Mark, his head of security, with an urgency in his voice that made the millionaire wake up immediately. "Sir, we have a problem. The press has found out about the DNA tests. The blood froze in his veins." "How?" "Someone from the lab leaked the information. The newspapers will publish the story in tomorrow's edition, but the websites are already preparing the headlines for this afternoon." He got out of bed, walking to the window of his room. Outside, the day was dawning peacefully. The sunflowers they had planted beginning to sprout. In a few hours, that peace would be destroyed. What kind of headlines? "Millionaire discovers abandoned child is his daughter. Negligent rich man lets sick daughter grow up in misery." The truth about the abandonment in the forest, all along those lines. Each word was like a blade cutting through his hope of keeping the situation under control. And the mother? They've already found her, got the address through the girl's old hospital records. She lives in a rundown apartment in the South Side, works as a cleaning lady in 3 different jobs. The reporters are already at her front door. The millionaire closed his eyes, imagining that fragile woman being harassed by journalists, eager for a sensational story. "I need to talk to her." "Sir, I don't think that's a good idea. Any direct contact will be interpreted as an attempt to influence her testimony. Your lawyers should already be advising you to stay away." But he wasn't thinking like a businessman, protecting his interests. He was thinking like a father who needed to understand why his daughter's mother had preferred to abandon her in a tree rather than seek help. "Daddy?" The girl's voice came from the hallway. She had woken up and was looking for him, as she did every morning since she had arrived at the mansion. "I need to hang up," he said to Mark. "Keep me informed." She appeared at the door of the room, still in her pajamas, carrying the teddy bear. "Why did you wake up so early?" "Work," he lied, trying to keep his voice normal. "Come on, let's have breakfast." During breakfast, she chattered about the dreams she had had, about how she was eager to see the sunflowers grow, about a book she wanted him to read to her. Her innocent normalcy contrasted cruelly with the storm that was approaching. At 2 in the afternoon, the phone began to ring incessantly. Reporters, TV producers, bloggers, all wanting his version of the story. He instructed the staff to disconnect all the phones in the mansion. At 4 in the afternoon, the first news cars arrived. They positioned themselves outside the property. Gates, cameras, and microphones pointed at the house. "Why are there so many people out there?" the girl asked, peeking out the living room window. "They're people from Daddy's work," he said, gently pulling her away from the window. "They want to talk to you?" "They do, but it's not a good time." At 5 in the afternoon, his sister arrived like a hurricane. She entered through the back door, avoiding the reporters, with an expression of fury that he knew well. "You've completely lost your mind!" she exploded as soon as she entered the room. 8 years! For 8 years you had a daughter and never told me. How didn't you know? How do you sleep with an employee and not follow up on the consequences? The girl was playing in the garden, but she could hear raised voices coming from inside the house. He lowered his voice, trying to calm his sister. It was a night, a single night, when Marina and I were almost separating. I was devastated. She was vulnerable. It happened, and then we never spoke again. And she never looked for you, never asked for help? Never. For 8 years I had no idea she existed. His sister threw herself into an armchair, running her, hands through her hair. "Do you know what this means for the company, for our reputation? The shareholders are going to freak out when they find out the CEO abandoned a sick daughter. I didn't abandon anyone because I didn't know she existed. That doesn't matter. Public perception is what matters. And the perception is that you're an irresponsible rich guy who let a child grow up in misery while you were accumulating millions." Dr. Anderson arrived soon after, carrying a file full of documents and a somber expression. "The situation is worse than we imagined," he announced. "The mother was arrested an hour ago." The world stopped. Arrested? Child endangerment, exposure to danger. The police went to her house after the press started putting pressure. She's going to spend the night at the precinct. The millionaire felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, but she was desperate. She didn't have the money to treat the girl. That can be used as a mitigating factor in the trial, but it doesn't change the fact that she committed a crime. Abandoning a child is a crime, regardless of the circumstances. His sister got up, pacing nervously around the room. And us? What's our legal situation? You haven't committed any crime. He didn't know about the child's existence, and when he found out, he immediately took responsibility. In fact, from a legal point of view, you are the victims here. Victims. The millionaire stood up abruptly. That woman spent 8 years raising my daughter alone, seeing her get sick, without money for treatment, and you think we're the victims? From a legal point of view, yes, Dr. Anderson insisted. She hid information about paternity, deprived you of the right to know the child, and put the girl's life at risk. She was afraid. Afraid of what? His sister asked. Afraid you were going to do the right thing. The question echoed in the silence of the room. Afraid of what? Afraid that he would reject his daughter. Afraid that he would sue her. Afraid that he would try to take the child away from her. Or afraid that he simply wouldn't care. Daddy? The girl's voice came from the door. She was standing there, holding the teddy bear, with a confused expression. Why is everyone yelling? All the adults in the room fell silent instantly. His sister turned, studying the girl for the first time with attention. The resemblance was undeniable. She had the family's eyes, the shape of the face that characterized all of them. No one's yelling, sweetie, he said, approaching her. Just talking about grown-up things. She's pretty, his sister said softly. She looks like you when you were a child. The girl smiled shyly. Are you the aunt he talked about? I am. I'm your daddy's sister. Why do you look angry? The direct question, asked with the brutal honesty of children, made the sister sigh. Because sometimes adults get angry when they find out important things they didn't know. Bad things? Not bad, just complicated. That night, after Dr. Anderson left and his sister slipped out the back door to avoid the reporters, he put the girl to bed, as he always did. He read a story, sang a song softly, and waited until she fell asleep. But as he was leaving the room, she called him, Daddy. Yes, the woman they arrested is my mother, isn't she? His heart stopped. How did she know? Why do you think that? Because you got very sad when you found out, and because everyone out here wants to talk to us about her. He went back to the side of the bed, sitting on the edge. How do you feel knowing that? Sad, because now she's in a cell and I'm in a nice house, and that doesn't seem fair. None of this is fair, he admitted. Are you going to help her too? The simple question hit him like a lightning bolt. Do you want me to help? She's my mother. Even though she left me in the tree, she's my mother. And you said she loved me. The millionaire looked at that 7-year-old girl who had gone through more trauma in a week than many adults go through in a lifetime, and who still demonstrated a capacity for forgiveness that shamed him. Then I will help, he promised. I don't know how, but I will help. When she finally fell asleep, he stayed awake until dawn, planning something that his lawyers, his sister, and every sensible person around him would say was complete madness. He was going to do more than help his daughter's mother. He was going to do something that would forever change the public perception of that whole story. The sunrise brought an even more intense storm of news. The headlines were plastered across all newspapers and websites. Abandoned child was millionaire's daughter. Negligent businessman has $200 million while daughter starved. Desperate mother arrested after abandonment of sick child. The millionaire was in the kitchen at 5 in the morning, preparing the girl's breakfast, something that had become his daily ritual, when Mark appeared with a grave expression. Sir, The situation is escalating. There are protesters outside demonstrating. Some defending you, others condemning. The police had to isolate the area. Through the window, he could see the groups forming. Posters with slogans like "Justice for the Desperate Mother" and "Irresponsible Rich People" contrasted with others that said, "Hero who saved a life" and "Courageous Father." And the mother spent the night at the precinct. The public defender who was assigned to her is newly graduated, without experience. She's going to be brought before the judge this morning for a custody hearing. The millionaire made a decision that he knew would change everything. "I want our best criminal defense attorney to represent her." Mark blinked, confused. "How so?" "Dr. Richard Stone. He's the best criminal defense attorney in the country. I want him to take over her defense, sir." "That doesn't make sense. She's the defendant. You're the victims. You can't pay her attorney." "I can, and I will. Call him now." "But sir." "Now, Mark." An hour later, Dr. Richard Stone was in the mansion's living room, an elegant man of 50 who had defended some of the most complex cases in the country. "Do you understand that this is highly irregular?" he said, quickly flipping through the paperwork. "You're the injured party. Paying for the defendant's defense is going to be interpreted as an admission of guilt or an attempt to influence the process. I don't care how it's interpreted. That woman spent 8 years raising my daughter alone, watched her get sick without being able to pay for treatment, and reached a point of desperation where she thought abandoning her was the only option. She needs a proper defense." Dr. Stone closed the file. "Can I ask why? Why do this?" The millionaire looked out the window, where he saw his daughter playing in the garden with a doll he had bought for her. "Because I've discovered that being a father isn't just about having shared DNA. It's about making difficult decisions for the good of the child, and my daughter deserves to have both parents free and dignified." "Both parents?" "She's going to grow up knowing that her mother was arrested. She's going to carry that guilt for the rest of her life, thinking that it's her fault that her mother was punished. But if I can prove that her mother is not a monster, but a desperate woman who made a terrible choice in an impossible situation, maybe my daughter can have peace." Dr. Stone nodded slowly. "And you're willing to ruin your reputation to do this?" "My reputation isn't worth more than my daughter's peace of mind." 2 hours later, Dr. Stone was at the precinct, officially taking over the mother's defense. The press went wild. "Millionaire pays lawyer to defend woman who abandoned his daughter" became the headline in real time. His sister called, furious. "You've completely lost your mind. The shareholders are panicking. The stock value dropped 15% just this morning. The stocks will recover. My daughter's peace of mind won't." "What peace of mind? She's 7 years old. She doesn't even understand what's happening." "She understands perfectly. Last night she asked me if I was going to help her mother too." His sister was silent for a long moment. "And what did you say?" "That I would. That I was going to help." "Jesus Christ." Her voice came out as a whisper. "Are you really going to sacrifice everything for this child?" "I'm not going to sacrifice anything. I'm going to prioritize what really matters." In the afternoon, he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He called a press conference. The event hall of a downtown hotel was taken over by journalists, cameras, and an atmosphere of tense anticipation. He went up to the podium, wearing a simple dark suit, without the ostentation that normally characterized his public appearances from the company's glory days. "I know you're all here because you want answers about a story that has dominated the headlines," he began, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "I'm going to give you those answers, but first, I want to talk about something more important than facts. I want to talk about humanity." The cameras focused on him as he continued. "A week ago, I found a 7-year-old girl hanging from a tree in the middle of the forest. She was unconscious, sick, abandoned like a discarded burden. At that moment, I didn't know she was my biological daughter. I only knew that she was a child who needed help. Murmurs began to spread through the room. Today I discovered that for 8 years I had a daughter I didn't know. A daughter who grew up in poverty while I accumulated wealth. A daughter who got sick while I wasted money on frivolous things. A daughter whose mother worked 3 jobs to try and pay for the necessary medical treatments. He paused, breathing deeply. Do you want to know if I'm guilty? I am. I am guilty of having been a man so closed off in my own world that a woman preferred to raise a child alone, in misery, rather than seek me out for help. I am guilty of having built such an intimidating image that someone thought it would be better to tie a child to a tree than to knock on my door. The silence in the room was absolute. But do you know who I'm not guilty of? The courage of that woman. She may have made a desperate choice, but for 8 years, she was a mother and father to my daughter. She worked to exhaustion, sold everything she had, and when she had nothing left to sell, made the most difficult decision of her life, to put her daughter's life in the hands of a stranger, hoping that he would be more capable of saving her than she was. Tears began to run down his face. I hired the best attorney in the country to defend her because my daughter deserves to know that her mother is not a monster. She's a heroine who sacrificed everything, including her own freedom, to save her daughter's life. The questions exploded from the audience, but he raised his hand to silence them. I won't answer questions today. I'm going to spend the next few days doing something I should have done 8 years ago, being a father. And being a man who deserves the forgiveness of 2 extraordinary women, my daughter and the courageous woman who raised her alone. When he left the podium, he knew that he had changed the course of the narrative forever. He didn't know if it would be enough to save his daughter's mother, but he knew that he had done the right thing. When he got home, he found his daughter waiting at the door. I saw you on television, she said simply. And what did you think? I thought you told the truth about Mommy. That night, for the first time since he had found her, she called them both my parents when she said her prayers before bed. The press conference completely changed the tone of the media coverage. Within hours, the headlines went from accusatory to reflective. The courage to admit one's own failure. Remorseful father fights for his daughter's mother. A lesson in humanity in difficult times. But the real test came 3 days later, during the mother's custody hearing. The millionaire arrived at the courthouse, accompanied only by his daughter. Against all the advice of his lawyers, his sister, and his security team, he decided that she should be present at the moment she would see her mother again. Are you sure about this? Dr. Stone had asked the night before. Seeing her mother being judged can be traumatic for her. More traumatic than growing up thinking her mother is a criminal, he replied. She needs to see that we are fighting for her mother, not against her. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, the curious, child rights activists, advocates for women in vulnerable situations, everyone wanted to witness that trial that had become a symbol of the country's social inequalities. When the mother was brought into the courtroom, handcuffed and wearing the orange prison uniform, the millionaire felt his daughter tense beside him. It was the first time they had seen each other since that morning in the forest. The woman looked like she had aged years in a few days. Her hair was disheveled, her face even thinner, her eyes heavy with a sadness that seemed to weigh tons. When her eyes met her daughter's, she broke down. "My girl," she whispered, tears falling freely. "My girl is okay." The girl got up from the chair where she was sitting and, before anyone could stop her, ran towards her mother. "Mommy!" The security guards moved to intercept her, but the judge, an elderly man with decades of experience, gestured for them to stop. "Let them," he said gently, "let them embrace." The embrace between mother and daughter lasted for an eternity, observed by the entire room in absolute silence. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. "Are you better?" the mother asked. touching her daughter's chest where the surgery had been performed. "I'm healed, Mummy. My heart works right now." "Thank God." The mother looked over her daughter's head, and her eyes met the millionaire's. "Thank you," she articulated silently. Dr. Stone got up when the judge called for the defense to present their arguments. It was one of the most important moments of his career, and he knew it. "Your Honor," he began, "we are not here today to judge a crime, but to understand a tragedy. The tragedy of a society that fails its mothers, that forces women into impossible choices, that condemns poverty as if it were a crime." He turned to the jury, composed of 6 ordinary people who represented society. For 8 years, the defendant worked 3 jobs to support a daughter with serious heart problems. She spent all her savings on medical consultations. She sold all her belongings to buy medicine. When she had nothing left to sell, she began to take out loans she couldn't pay. Dr. Stone presented a pile of documents, proof of payment for consultations, medical prescriptions, receipts for medicine, loan agreements. In the last 6 months, she owed 3 months' rent. She'd been evicted twice. Loan sharks threatened her daily, and her daughter was dying. The district attorney, a young and ambitious man, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He clearly hadn't expected the defense to be so well prepared. On the day of the abandonment, Dr. Stone continued, she had received a medical ultimatum. The child needed surgery within a week, or she would die. The cost of the surgery was $200,000. She earned, in the 3 jobs combined, $2,000 a month. He paused dramatically. Do the math. To raise $200,000 with a salary of $2,000 a month, she would need over 8 years. Without eating, without paying rent, without buying a single piece of clothing. Dr. Stone approached the jury, looking each of them in the eyes. On the day of the abandonment, she had tried everything. She sought out NGOs, churches, politicians, public hospitals. Everyone said she was on the waiting list, the line to die. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, so she made a decision that no mother should ever have to make. She chose between staying with her daughter and watching her die, or putting her where someone with resources could save her. Dr. Stone turned to where the millionaire was sitting with the girl, and she chose right, because today this girl is alive, healthy, and loved by 2 parents who have learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about sacrifice. The prosecutor tried to argue that abandonment was a crime regardless of the circumstances, but his words sounded empty in the face of the mountain of evidence presented by the defense. When it was time for the testimonies, the millionaire asked, "To speak, Your Honor," he said, standing up. "For 3 years, I lived as a dead man, thinking that life wasn't worth it anymore after losing my family. This woman gave me back life by giving me a second chance to be a father." He looked directly at the girl's mother. "She took care of our daughter when I didn't even know she existed. She worked to exhaustion, sacrificed herself to the limit, and when she had nothing left to give, she gave what remained, her own freedom." His voice trembled with emotion. "I ask this court to consider not only the act of abandonment, but the love that motivated that act. This woman didn't abandon a daughter. She saved a daughter." Then it was the girl's turn to speak. Against all protocols, the judge allowed her to approach the microphone. "My name is..." She hesitated, looking at the millionaire, who nodded encouragingly. "My name is Anna, and I have 2 parents who love me very much." Her small voice echoed through the silent courtroom. "My mother," she said, looking at the woman in handcuffs, "carried me when I couldn't walk because my heart hurt. She sang to me when I was scared. She cried secretly when she thought I was sleeping, but she always smiled when I woke up." Tears ran down all the faces present. "And my daddy," she continued, looking at the millionaire, "found me when I needed him most. He fixed my broken heart and taught me that families can be made of love, not just blood." She turned to the judge. "My mother isn't a criminal. She's a heroine who saved my life in the only way she could." The judge needed a long moment to compose himself before speaking. "In 40 years of career," he said finally, "I have never witnessed a case as complex as this one. Here we have the most loving abandonment and the bravest rescue I have ever seen." He looked at the mother. "Madam, what you did is technically a crime. But the extraordinary circumstances of this case, combined with the positive outcome and the testimony of all parties involved, lead me to apply a suspended sentence." Murmurs of relief echoed through the room. "You are free, but you will be on probation for 2 years, during which time you must perform community service in nurseries and orphanages so that your experience as a mother can help other children." When the handcuffs were removed, the mother ran to hug her daughter again. This time, the millionaire joined the embrace, and the three remained that way for long minutes, observed by hundreds of people who were witnessing the birth of an unlikely family. Outside the courthouse, a crowd awaited them. But they weren't hostile protests. They were ordinary people, families, mothers and fathers who had identified with that story of love, sacrifice and redemption. "Anna! Anna!" they shouted, applauding when she appeared between the two parents. That night, the three had dinner together for the first time. The house, which had been silent for 3 years, was full of life again. The mother, still shy and insecure, could hardly believe that she was free and that her daughter was healthy. "I don't know how to thank you," she said to the millionaire. While Anna was asleep on the living room sofa, exhausted by the emotional day. "You don't need to thank me. You gave her to me. She gave me my life back. But I can't stay here forever. You barely know each other, and You're her mother," he interrupted, "and she needs both of you. I can provide financial stability, but you gave her 8 years of unconditional love. She needs both." The mother looked around the luxurious mansion. "I don't belong in this world." "None of us belonged in this world," he said softly. "But now we're a family, and families make everything work." 3 months later, the transformation was complete. The mansion had been remodeled to accommodate 3 people who were learning to live together. The mother was working as a coordinator of a social project created by the millionaire to help mothers in vulnerable situations. Anna was attending a private school where she was one of the brightest students in her class. And the millionaire, he had discovered that true wealth was not in his bank account, but in the shouts of "Good night, Daddy," that echoed through the house every night, and in the shy smiles of a woman who had learned to trust again, a year after the rescue in the forest. Life had taken on a routine that none of the 3 had ever imagined possible. The mansion, which had once echoed only with the silence of solitude, now vibrated with the sounds of a real family, morning laughter, conversations during dinner, and the comforting noise of people who genuinely cared about each other. Anna, now 8 years old, ran through the gardens where the sunflowers had grown tall and golden, her inexhaustible energy being the most vivid testimony of her complete recovery. Her heart, once fragile and irregular, now pumped strong enough to sustain dreams that seemed impossible a year before. "Daddy, Mommy, come see," she shouted from the garden window one Saturday morning. "The sunflowers are as tall as me." The millionaire and the mother came out of the house together, something that had become natural over the months. The relationship between them had evolved from strangeness to mutual respect, and then to something deeper. Not necessarily romance, but a solid partnership built on the shared love for Anna and the mutual recognition of their own journeys of redemption. "She's right," said the mother, smiling as she watched Anna measure her height against the flowers. "They've grown as much as she has." "Everything grows when it receives the proper care," he replied, but his eyes weren't on the sunflowers. They were on the 2 women who had transformed his house into a home. The mother had changed dramatically that year. The constant fear had left her eyes, replaced by a growing confidence. She had become not only an employee in his social project, but a respected leader in the community. helping dozens of other mothers in desperate situations. Her personal experience, once a source of shame, had become her greatest strength in helping other people. "There's a meeting at school on Monday," she said, checking an agenda that had become as organized as his. Anna has been selected for the gifted student program," he smiled. "Family smarts." "From both sides," she completed, and for the first time there was no bitterness in her voice when speaking about the past. The social project they had created together, the Open Heart Institute, had already helped over 200 families. It offered everything from medical assistance to legal guidance, including psychological support and job opportunities. Their personal story had become a symbol of hope for people who found themselves in situations similar to those she had faced. "Daddy," Anna ran to them, holding a flower she had carefully picked. "This is for you." He knelt to receive the flower, but she kept talking. "And this," she said, running to get another, "is for Mommy." The mother accepted the flower with tear-filled eyes. Even after a year, she was still moved by simple gestures of affection. "And this," Anna said, taking a third flower, "is for our family." She placed the third flower in the center between the other two, because there are 3 flowers, but they make one bouquet. The simple metaphor of an 8-year-old child perfectly summarized what they had become. 3 individual people who had found a way to flourish together. That afternoon, while Anna was playing in the garden, the millionaire and the mother sat on the terrace, something they did regularly to discuss the direction of the family and the institute. "Have you ever thought if we did the right thing?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" "Anna could have had a traditional family. You could have married again, given her a normal mother. I could have tried to rebuild my life somewhere else." He interrupted her gently. "Do you regret it?" "Never." The answer came out immediately and firmly. "But sometimes I wonder if she wouldn't deserve something more conventional." "Look at her," he said, pointing to Anna, who was teaching tricks to a dog they had adopted a few months before. "Do you see a child who needs something more conventional?" The mother watched her daughter, healthy, confident, bright, surrounded by love and opportunities, laughing without the shadow of worry that she used to carry. "No," she admitted. "I see a child who has exactly what she needs." "We all have," he said softly. It was true. In recent months, he had gradually returned to the active management of his businesses, but with a completely different perspective. The company had become a tool for social impact, with extensive programs of corporate responsibility and investments in projects that made a real difference in people's lives. His sister, initially skeptical about the whole situation, had become one of the biggest advocates of the new direction of the company and of the unconventional family he had formed. "The stock is at its highest value in history," she had commented at a recent meeting. "It seems investors like it when companies have a real purpose." But for him, financial success had become secondary. True success was in the small moments. Anna asking about homework during dinner, the mother singing softly while preparing breakfast, the sound of 3 people living harmoniously in the space that once housed only ghosts of a lost past. That night, as they had done every night for almost a year, the 3 gathered in the living room for the reading ritual before bed. It was a sacred moment that none of them would dare miss. "What story today?" asked the millionaire, flipping through the collection of books they had accumulated. "A true story," Anna said. "Our story." "Our story isn't in a book," the mother smiled. "Tell the story yourselves," Anna insisted, snuggling between the 2 of them on the large sofa. And so they told it. They told the story of a man who had lost everything and stopped living. They told the story of a woman who loved her daughter so much that she was willing to sacrifice everything for her. They told the story of a brave girl who survived the impossible and brought 2 broken people back to life. And did they live happily ever after? Anna asked, as she always did at the end. They lived, the millionaire corrected. And they discovered that living with people you love is the definition of happiness. When Anna finally fell asleep, carried to her room by the millionaire while the mother tidied up the books, the two adults met again on the terrace, watching the stars. "You know," the mother said, "during all those years alone, I used to look at the stars and imagine what it would be like if we had a real family. And now I know that family isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, a choice you make every day, a commitment to be present even when it's difficult." He nodded. 3 years ago, I thought my story was over, that there were no more chapters to write. And now I know that sometimes the best chapters begin when you think the book is already finished. They remained in comfortable silence for a long moment, each lost in reflections on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked finally. He thought carefully before answering. "I regret not knowing about Anna from the beginning. I regret you having to go through so much suffering alone. I regret being the kind of man who made people afraid to ask for help." He paused. "But I don't regret where we've arrived. I don't regret this strange and wonderful family we've built together." "Neither do I," she said softly. In the weeks that followed, their story continued to inspire people around the world. The Open Heart Institute had received donations from dozens of countries, allowing them to expand their work to other cities and states. Anna had become a small, informal ambassador for the Institute, participating in events and telling her story with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "I had a broken heart," she said to emotional audiences, "but it wasn't just my heart that was healed. My daddy's heart was broken too, and mommy's heart too. Now all our hearts work right." A year and a half after the rescue, on a spring morning, when the garden sunflowers were once again blooming, Anna made an announcement during breakfast. "I want to change my name," she said casually, while eating cereal. The two adults looked at each other, surprised. "To what?" the mother asked. "Anna Hart." "Heart?" the millionaire repeated. "Yes, because my heart was healed, your hearts were healed, and now we help other hearts get healed too. We're the Hart family." The simplicity of a child's logic once again left them speechless. "Besides," Anna continued, "that way everyone will know that it doesn't matter how a family starts. What matters is how connected the hearts are." 2 weeks later, the three were at the courthouse, formalizing not only Anna's name change, but also the mutual legal adoption that made them officially a family in the eyes of the law. "Hart family," said the courthouse clerk, stamping the final documents. "Interesting choice." "It wasn't a choice," Anna corrected seriously. "It was destiny." That night, when the three returned home, their home theirs, Anna stopped in the garden where it had all begun. "You know what's funny?" she said, looking at the tree where she had been found. "If I hadn't gotten sick, Mommy would never have left me in the tree. If she hadn't left me in the tree, Daddy would never have found me. If Daddy hadn't found me, the three of us would never have become a family." She paused, processing her own thoughts. So maybe bad things sometimes happen, so that good things can happen too. The millionaire knelt beside her, moved by the wisdom of that girl who had been through so much, but who still managed to find meaning and hope in her journey. "What do you think would have happened if things were different?" he asked. Anna thought for a long moment. "I think I would have died," she said with the brutal honesty of children. "Mommy would have been alone and very sad. And you would have continued alone too, without knowing you had a daughter." She looked at the two adults. "So even though it was scary at the time, I'm happy it happened the way it did, because now we are a real family." As they went inside that night, the millionaire reflected on Anna's words. She was right. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the greatest tragedies. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what's really worth it. 3 years before, he had lost a family in a tragic accident. 2 years before, a desperate woman had made the most difficult decision of her life. A year and a half before, a girl had almost died hanging from a tree. But from this sequence of tragedies had been born something that none of them could have planned. A family united not by blood or convention, but by love, sacrifice, and second chances. That night, as he put Anna to bed, she asked a question that made him stop and think, "Daddy, do you think there are other children like me, lost, waiting for someone to find them?" "Probably," he admitted. "So maybe our family can grow a little more?" He smiled, realizing that Anna's capacity for love had no limits. "Maybe. That would be cool," she said, closing her eyes. "More healed hearts mean more love in the world." As he left the room, the millionaire knew that Anna had planted a seed that would grow. They had started by saving one life, but perhaps they could save many more. After all, they were the Heart family, and healthy hearts have an infinite capacity to love. 2 years after the rescue, the Open Heart Institute had become a national benchmark in family reunification and support for mothers in vulnerable situations. Anna, now 10 years old, had become not only an exemplary student, but also a small activist for children's rights. And the family that had been born from the greatest tragedy had become the greatest miracle that any of them could imagine. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. And tell me in the comments, what would you do in the millionaire's place? Share this story with someone special, because sometimes we all need to remember that the most beautiful families are the ones we choose to build with love.